This kind of video is not my style. I'm not into confrontational BS with one creator calling out another really just for the sake of cheap clicks and starting some drama. This is especially boring when it's one teeny little channel calling out a bigger one. And while my channel may be teeny and theirs might be massive, my ultimate goal isn't to start drama, but really just to share a strong difference of opinion. It's an opinion that I do feel strong enough does justify the clickbaity nature of my own thumbnail and title, but let's get into it. If you somehow live under a rock and are unaware, Glenn from SpectreSoundStudios is one of the largest music production channels here on YouTube, with a little bit over 500,000 subscribers currently. Glenn is very passionate about metal music, and as a metal producer himself, that used to be the focus of his content, really specifically on sharing tips and tricks on how to get a good production in the genre of metal. In the past couple years though, there seems to be a strong shift in his content, really focusing on kind of debunking commonly held guitar myths. And the one that I'm specifically pointing out here is his video that apparently pickups make no difference in metal guitar tone. And that's a pretty bold claim, and he's even got a thumbnail to go along with it claiming that this is the secret that the pickup companies don't want you to know about. Well, okay Glenn, let's see what you got. Process of reviewing many different guitars recently, Glenn, in his own opinion, said that he has began to notice that there's very little difference in the tone from one instrument to the next when producing a high-gain metal rhythm tone. So to illustrate this discovery, he plays the exact same riff on a variety of different guitars, and I will admit, they do sound remarkably similar. This is despite all of the guitars being from a variety of brands with way different construction and way different pickups. Some of them have active pickups, some of them have passive pickups, and most importantly for the purpose of his video, they're all from a wide range of manufacturers, so it's not like it's all EMG pickups or all Seymour Duncan pickups. So despite this variety of guitars, construction, and hardware, they do all sound similar. He also recorded a DI track of all of his takes, and he plays that audio on its own, and they all sound very different. His conclusion? The high-gain amp colors the tone so strongly that it basically hides all of those very strong tonal variations from the DI tracks. Now, before I get into my very strong objections to Glenn's conclusions, I do just want to take 1 second to say that I admire Glenn both as a creator in general online, obviously with his tremendous amount of success, and also as a metal producer in general. I discovered his videos when I was looking for some tips and tricks to help kick my productions up a notch, and specifically his one video showing how he used a multi-band compressor to help control the palm mutes on a rhythm guitar really was a revelation for me. So in the slim off chance you do happen to see this video, Glenn, I would just like to say thank you. That really has made a big difference in all of my productions. Okay, so what are my problems with Glenn's video? Well, my issue is that in the 15 years I've been a quote-unquote professional musician, none of my experience line up with anything that he illustrated in his video. So one of my focuses here on my channel is in-depth guitar reviews. I've now recorded over 50 different guitars, and they all sound very different. I do think I'm justified in saying that they sound different, as I have switched from a real physical amp in my productions to virtual amps. And for the most part, I tend to use a template when I'm working so that I can work quicker. Each guitar is recorded with the identical virtual rig, same virtual cabinet settings, same processing, and they always sound very different. You know, working from a template helps save time. So before I record any guitar, I always prep the guitar with Gorgamite, so I polish the frets, I polish the fingerboard. I always string them with my favorite sets of Stringjoy strings. I think they sound great. I'm not an endorsed artist, it's just what I like. I also use a string source cable directly into a Motu M2 interface. That's been my method to get the cleanest signal into my DAW before using the virtual amps. I also dial my virtual amps to be as transparent as possible with a tone that lets the qualities, or lack thereof, of the instruments really shine. Now, before we hear my examples, it should go without being said, you do need to listen with a good set of headphones or reference speakers. Just using your earbuds that came with your iPhone, or just using smartphone speakers, tablet speakers, laptop speakers, that is not going to cut it. So don't be lazy, go and get your headphones, pop on your reference speakers, and let's take a listen. This first clip is an older one. It's from active versus passive pickups. And in this clip, I'm going to be playing a Strandberg Bowden Metal 8 loaded with Fishman Fluence Moderns and a J Custom Ibanez RG7 CST loaded with DiMarzio Blaze 7s. Again, I'm using the exact same everything for each guitar, string joy strings, that guitar source cable directly into my Emotu M2 interface, and I'm using Neural DSP's Archetype Pliny. Well, I would say that's a sizable difference between the two guitars, not only in tone, but also in articulation. The amp is responding very differently to the palm mutes depending on the instrument that is playing. This is because the output levels are very different on the two different instruments. The Fishman Fluence pickups are a hotter pickup than the DiMarzios. And this would be my first problem that I had with Glenn's video. I did not adjust the gain setting on my interface while I was recording. I didn't want to do this because I want the natural characteristics of the pickup to shine, which isn't just tone, but it is also output level. And that output level, therefore, will change the way the virtual amp responds. Now, Glenn didn't say if he matched the gain level in some way, but in his video, all of the guitars sounded exactly the same with regard to saturation, like as if he had manipulated the audio after the fact to make them all be even the way they were hitting the amp. And in my opinion, that's a bit dishonest. You shouldn't be adjusting the gain level before it hits the amp in some sort of a shootout. You should be setting it to a good saturation level and then just leaving it so that the different characteristics of each pickup is going to shine. As for the overall tone, they are very different. The Strandberg has a slight sort of push in the mids. It might even be described as slightly honky, which makes sense as it is primarily a pickup used in a quote-unquote gent genre where you want like a mids forward or mid-present tone. Whereas the Ibanez with the DiMarzio Blaze pickups, which they advertise as having a big scoop in the mids, has a scooped sound in the mids. I'm sure Glenn will agree with me completely that soloed out guitar tone is only one thing. How that tone, or if that tone, more importantly, sits in a mix is really the thing that matters. This is also the core of my argument of why I believe very strongly he is wrong. The most common recording technique with the guitar is to double track it. Now obviously once you get multiple tracks of a guitar running, those tonal variations, in my opinion, add up. The next set of examples will all be off of my Doom Volume 1 and Doom Volume 2 cover/tribute EPs that I released recently. And again, as I said earlier, each guitar is always prepped and recorded with the exact same strings in the exact same method. These clips are all using Neural DSP's Fortin Nameless virtual amp, and it will feature a Schecter Reaper 6, an Ibanez RG-AR42MF MT, Ibanez and their model names, and last but definitely not least, a Strandberg Bowden Standard 6. These guitars all have their stock pickups, which are passive pickups, and all of the clips, while different, are running on the bridge pickup. I find the Schecter Reaper to be the most balanced of all of the guitars here. It's bright, balanced, and has a ton of presence in the mix. The Strandberg is kind of woody sounding with a definite push in the mids, and the Ibanez sounds like balls. Damn, that guitar sucked. It was really hard to record with. It's thin, it's buzzy, and it lacks any of the complexity shared by either the Strandberg or the Schecter, despite those two guitars still being very different. Again, nothing is different between these two guitars. I'm using the identical copy of the virtual amp with, again, a copy of my processing. The only thing that has changed is the guitars. Working from a template sure saves time. For the next round of clips, I'll be honest, I just wanted an excuse to shred, so there it is. Glenn didn't play any lead guitar clips, but I think this is just as relevant when it comes to lead guitar, even if it's single tracked like all of these clips will be. And after all, if Glenn is right, it's a high gain tone, it shouldn't make a difference. The guitars here will be slightly different than my first set of clips because I use different virtual amps for the leads on those songs. The guitars are again that very shitty IBI, RG, whatever AR they call it, an EVH Wolfgang WG Standard, and again that way overachieving Schecter Reaper 6. All three guitars are again prepared in identical manner, same strings, same cable into the same interface, and they're all using a copy of Neural DSP's Soldano SLO 100 plugin with, again, identical processing after the fact. The Ibanez still sounds like balls, it's thin and buzzy, the high notes are like brittle, and the low notes get flubby and very loose. The EVH has a nice kind of warm woody tone going on with a forward mids, but I don't like the way the low notes kind of break up. It was kind of a crappy guitar as well, if I'm honest. The Reaper is clearly the best out of these three without a doubt, with a very clear, present tone that's not overly bright or shrill, but still has a nice presence and really cuts through the mix great. That Reaper, man, it was one good cheap guitar. Sometimes the truth is subtle though, and I know the internet doesn't do well with subtle. So let's go back to my active versus passive pickup shootout video that I made. I was being a bit selective on purpose with which clip I showed you first to prove my point a little stronger, and let's take a look at this one now. So wait, now there's not such an obvious difference, right? Well, the subtle thing here is how you play and what you play can still make a big difference. The player still matters. And I really don't want to talk about Glenn's guitar playing, as I know it's a bit of a cheap shot, and especially if you're doing a guitar review, it really doesn't matter if you're quote-unquote good or bad. You can still judge the instrument on its merits, but his playing just is not doing him any favors. He's complained countless times in his videos in his rather irritating, jokey, screaming, "I'm not serious, but I am serious" voice about other musicians rolling up unprepared to record for a session. He's saying you need to practice and be prepared when you come in to record. Yeah, I agree, man, but then maybe practice a bit of what you're preaching. I would argue that, hey, your channel has 500,000 subs, bud. Maybe that can afford you enough time to kind of dial in that playing a little bit better. Sloppy riffing with arguably entirely too much gain for the tone, especially in the context of a mix, doesn't prove anything, bud. I'm sorry. And wait a second, did those clips that I played at the beginning of this section actually sound as similar as I did? What about now? When A-B back and forth, clearly that difference in the mids is very obvious again. our ears can and will play tricks on us, especially when you're in a music production setting. It takes years of patience and practice to learn, that subjective decision of what this song quote unquote needs for that tone to work. And I know Glenn knows this as a producer that has made way more records than I have. One thing I've always admired about Glenn is that in the past he's always been very upfront about sharing his own struggles and his own exploration and frustration to find those tones that work in the context of a mix. So let's follow Glenn's logic, shall we? The pickups don't make a difference. The construction of the guitar doesn't make a difference. Obviously, the wood doesn't make a difference. You'd have to be a moron to believe that, right? So Glenn, does that mean you're saying there's no such thing as a bad-sounding guitar? That kinda sounds like what your conclusion is, like just buy a good amp and then whatever you plug into it won't matter. I highly doubt you would agree with that statement. It's pretty absurd on the face of it. Obviously, there are some guitars that just sound bad. He's been very vocal about criticizing certain brands on their quality, namely Sterling by Music Man. I know we both completely agree on that. You kind of beat me to the punch with your video criticizing Sterling. I was in the process of making my own just before yours came out. And I have to come back to my own experience. I mean, why did the EVH and Ibanez guitar that I tested sound objectively worse than either the Schecter or that Stradbroke? To be clear here, I am not endorsed by any companies. I mean, I think that would be abundantly clear by the size of my channel, and I'm gonna have 5,000 subs yet. Believe me when I say I want all of my videos I produce to sound great. It does me no service to put out subpar sounding content. It's not gonna help my channel grow, so believe me, I really try to polish those turd guitars as best as I possibly can. But sometimes there's just no way to polish that turd. Bad sounding guitar just sounds bad. And I keep just getting hung up on Glenn's dismissal of the subtle differences. It almost annoys me more because he's an audio engineer. That's what he does. He makes records. That's his strength as a musician. Sorry, bud, it's not a guitar player. This would be like me as a guitar teacher telling my students that, Dorian and melodic minor, they're basically the same. I mean, there's only one note different. You'd have to be a total sucker to think that would make some sort of a meaningful difference. Boy, that would be wrong and malpractice as a teacher. If you take the time to go back to Glenn's actual video and listen to his clips with a good set of headphones or a good set of reference speakers, there are subtle differences in his video. By dismissing and pretending that those subtle variations don't exist, he's being dishonest. He knows most people are not gonna watch his video in a good listening environment. They're probably watching it on the toilet with their smartphone. This also frustrates me because great engineers know those subtle, almost imperceivable changes that help make a mix come together. If you sit and watch like a Nolly or CLA mixing class, you'll see that sometimes they make big moves, but a lot of them can be these little subtle moves that are almost imperceivable, but they all add up in the context of a mix to make it all come together. By Glenn's logic, each one of those little changes would be completely inconsequential. I mean, they're basically not there after all. I'm arguing this is exactly the same when it comes to guitar tone because double tracking is the backbone of modern guitar production. The second you start double tracking and layering multiple guitar parts in a section, those tonal variations and changes add up, either for the better, like in the case of the Schecter, or for the worse, like in the case of the Ibanez. I know he knows this, and that's what makes me frustrated. So to wrap up this video, there seems like there are two possible interpretations of Glenn's video. There's either the charitable or there's the harsh. Option one is he's a professional and he's just sharing his experiences and results. He doesn't care if it makes pickup companies angry or if it shakes up our own pre-misconceptions about guitar tone and what matters. Or there's option two. He stacked the deck in his favor. He dialed up a deliberately oversaturated and vague tone just to back up the premise of his thumbnail and get some cheap clicks. Well, clearly, y'all know what camp I fall into. And I know the title and my thumbnail is clickbait garbage just as much as his is. But hey, it's a free country, he's entitled to have his own strong opinions, and so am I. And in my opinion, his videos are dishonest and misleading just for the sake of cheap clicks and easy views. So I'll let you be the judge, as I'm sure there are a number of comments that are completely calm and reasonable, as every YouTube comment section always is. Thank you for watching, rock on, and I'll see you in the next one.